One of the most incredible luxuries that you can possibly have is to take your family out to a truly excellent Italian restaurant. And the food is always incredible, satisfying, and flavorful. And the desserts never fail to satisfy either. Now, one of my absolute favorite classic restaurant desserts that you'll find at really nice family-owned Italian restaurants has to be Italian rum cake. Now, I don't mean to be a stick-in-the-mud teetotaler or anything like that, but I really don't prefer to drink alcohol. It's not really something I do, and I've been trying to figure out how I can possibly make an Italian rum cake. So I would say 1 teaspoon of rum should be all right. If you just use the small teaspoon.
What are people doing here? Look, I'm not filming a video today. I'm on a 3-day binge. You're just gonna have to entertain yourself some other way. Alright? Watch another video.
That man was not me. Crap. Okay, so we are getting ready to start this magnificent classic Italian rum cake. And now to do this, we're going to be making a classic Genoise, which is the famous French sponge cake, the dread of many pastry chefs and home cooks alike. Now, the standard that I use for a French Genoise comes from a book called TARTINE, which I'm sure a lot of you are probably already familiar with this book. If not, if you're a serious home baker, I would get one of these. The classic Genoise, it's on page 198. Memorize it, okay? It's actually it's one of those deceptive things that is real easy to screw up unless you just follow the rules. Okay, so that's the standard recipe. I just wanted to give credit where credit is due. This is definitely a really nice result every time, in my opinion. So that recipe is going to be in the description box. If you don't have the book, you don't know the classic Tartine Genoise, that's what I'm using for this Italian rum cake. Now, as I said, there's a few rules that you have to follow, okay? And there's a few pieces of equipment that, in my opinion, to pull this cake off properly, you're going to definitely need, which first and foremost, you really should have a stand mixer. I suppose you could do it without, but it wouldn't be nearly as much fun. Another thing you are definitely going to need is a 3-inch height by 10-inch diameter springform cheesecake pan, whatever you may call it. You're going to want to butter and flour the bottom, but not the sides, parchment all around. Okay, prepare that first, and then after you're done with that, turn your oven on to 350, because this is one of those cakes, you can't put this cake in a cold oven. Your oven has to be up to temp. Okay, other than that, just some pot of simmering water. It should be barely steaming, over low heat or so, and stainless steel mixing bowl. You should be all set. Weigh out 70 grams of unsalted butter. This is Kerrygold. I just put it in a glass bowl, melt it, and set it to the side to cool down. You don't want it too hot, but it has to be melted, so you may have to warm it up again. Sift together 170 grams of organic flour and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, non-GMO. Sift that together and put that to the side. 6, these are free-range room temperature eggs cracked into a bowl. Set that to the side. This is 210 grams of granulated sugar. Just set that to the side, and a pinch of salt. Just kind of break up those eggs, whisk them for a minute or two. So once you have your eggs broken up, just make sure your water's not too hot. I'm just going to put the 210 grams of sugar, granulated sugar, in there. Scrape the eggs into your bowl and just start whisking that. Don't forget your little pinch of salt there. That goes in there too. And you're just going to whisk this over this simmering water for about 5-6 minutes. Okay, so this egg and sugar and a pinch of salt mixture has now been beaten for about whipped up for about 7 minutes over simmering water. And as you can see, the mixture has lightened up and it should be glossy and very, very pale yellow. Now we're just going to put this over the stand mixer here, and we're going to fit that with the whisk attachment. Okay, so this has been given, the eggs have been given about 7 minutes or so. And what you're looking for is something they call the ribbon stage. And that just means that you see it stays a little bit at the surface of the batter and before it melts back in. And that's what you want. The flour and cornstarch that you had set aside in 3 stages and fold. So this flour has been sifted at least twice, maybe 3 times. I sifted the flour and the cornstarch together so that you get as few lumps as possible, and just very gently fold that in. So then lastly, to incorporate your butter, remember we had 70 grams of melted butter. It should still be just warm to the touch, just warm. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take about a cup here of this batter and mix all that butter into that cup. See that? And just incorporate that butter into this batter. About a cup of batter there. Just incorporate it. Then once you have your butter incorporated into that, you can go ahead and transfer that back into the mixing bowl. And then at that point, you just fold that in there. So immediately transfer the batter straight into your prepared pan. and bake. 350, going to take about 45 minutes. Immediately into the center of your oven, 350 for about 45 minutes. Okay, so once you have your Genoise sorted out, and just let that cool down to room temperature, it's probably best to wrap it real tight and set it up in the refrigerator. It'll just be a little easier to slice that way. But now, traditionally with these Italian rum cakes that you see out there, the different recipes, they usually, but not always, come with two different types of pastry cream, or as in the Italian version, I think they call it something like Crema Pastera. Now, if you're a nice little old Italian grandma, don't kill me because I do not speak Italian, but I'm pretty sure that's sort of how you say it. They use a Crema Pastera, okay, which is just basically custard cream. I always use the French version. I've been doing this exact same recipe since pastry school, so this is the one that I always use, and it's just best. We're going to do two different kinds of the Crema Pastera. We're going to do a vanilla bean, and we're going to do a chocolate. So I'm just going to make one batch, and then we'll split it up and use it that way. So best to just bring you over here so you can kind of see what's going on, and I'll explain this to you. So as always, the weights and measures and ingredients, the whole recipe will be down in the description box, but what we see here is to make this Crema Pastera, I've got here sifted together 2 ounces of cornstarch, 8 ounces of granulated sugar, and also a half teaspoon of sea salt. Here we have 4 pasture-raised organic eggs, whole eggs. You could use a vanilla pod. In this case, I'm using a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. It's organic. And for the chocolate, as I usually do, I'm using the 55% Lind milk chocolate. Then you're going to need a small sauce pot. You'll need a whisk, a wire mesh strainer, and here we have 4 ounces of Kerrygold unsalted butter, and also 2 pints of heavy cream. Okay, so the first thing you want to do with this Crema Pastera recipe is, after you have your sugar, cornstarch, and salt sifted together, you just want to make a little well and put the 4 eggs in there and kind of break those up, and whisk this together until it's nice and smooth. So once you have that nice and combined, just set that to the side. So then the next thing you want to do is just take you can use milk, whole milk, you can use half and half, you can use heavy cream. Just depends on how rich you want it. And just put that over low heat. So now just bring that up to the simmer here. Take a few minutes. Just be careful, don't walk away. Obviously this stuff will boil over on you. So while that's heating up, you can take your vanilla bean paste, or if you were just scraping the seeds out of a pod, you you can put those in at this point. I'm just using 1 level teaspoon here of the vanilla bean paste. Okay, so as soon as your hot cream, hot milk comes to a scald like that and it's steaming and you're seeing little bubbles break the surface, then it's time to temper the egg mixture. And this is how you do that. The first thing you want to do is put about 1/3 or so of it, let me put this over here so you can see this, into your milk mixture. And then put your cream back right onto the burner. And as soon as that's mixed up, just put that straight back into the pot, just like that. And whisk it the whole time. Bring this back to the boil. Now, you're going to want to continue whisking this and boiling until it starts to thicken. And once you see that it's at a fairly brisk, not exactly like a full boil, but you know, it has to cook for a little bit to get that raw cornstarch flavor out of there. But just don't stop whisking. You should see this begin to thicken pretty quickly. So as soon as it starts to thicken like that, you'll see it comes to like a pudding consistency very quickly. Just make sure that your heat's not too high so nothing scorches, and just continue cooking like this. Once it's that consistency, continue cooking that for just maybe 10 to 15 seconds. And this is to cook out any raw cornstarch flavor that might be in there. Just about that long, and then take it off. Now the next thing you want to do, since we're making 2 separate pastry creams here, is to divvy this up, and I put them in half pans here like this so that it can cool down very quickly. So I'm going to be straining this in 2 batches. Of course, the reason why you want to strain this mixture is just in case any of your eggs kind of curdled a little bit, you can say, cooked, any lumps of anything, this is just an extra step. You can get a little bit of a smoother, silkier texture out of your pastry cream. Crema Pastera. You can skip this step if you really want to. I always do it. I just think that it gives it a little bit nicer of a silky texture. So as soon as you have your pastry creams divvied up like that, then the next thing you want to do is take 2 ounces of the butter. This is just room temperature butter, Kerrygold unsalted, and pat the top like that. And now for the chocolate one, I'm just going to take my nice bar, put it right on top. Cover that bar up for a couple of minutes there. Just let that heat do its work. Meanwhile, with the vanilla, you can just whisk that nice butter right in. Kind of emulsify that right into the pastry cream. And now what you want to do right away with this is don't let this set out. You're going to want to put this directly into the refrigerator. But best to just put a little plastic film over the top of it. Sit it down in there so you don't get a skin on it. And then as soon as you've let your chocolate bar kind of melt down like that, just start whisking all that pastry cream and the butter and the chocolate together. Et voila, most delicious, richest, most unctuous chocolate pudding you've ever stuck in your mouth. You could also take this at this point and fold in sweetened whipped cream and you'd have an incredible chocolate mousse. Okay, so once you have your Crema Pastera in the refrigerator, it's important to chill that down pretty good. So now there are just a few loose ends to tie up before we can cut and assemble our cake, our Italian rum cake. So the first thing you are going to need is cake syrup. Okay, it's very similar to simple syrup. Basically, this recipe is pretty easy to remember because it's 1 quart of filtered water and 1 pound of granulated sugar. So you just want to bring that water up to temperature and then add this in and cook it for a minute or so. You don't want this too thick. And then to that we are going to put a 1/4 cup of rum. Now there's a lot. You could basically use any rum that you like. You can use Myers Dark if you have it on hand for baking. That's always a good flavor. This is Bacardi Gold, golden rum. So I'm going to put into this cake syrup 1/4 cup. Now, of course, that's going to make a fairly strong rum flavor, which I like, that rummy, boozy flavor in an Italian rum cake. You could just do 1 tablespoon if you want. If you don't want to use alcohol, you could always just get rum extract. They do have that in the baking aisle, so it wouldn't be nearly as good in my opinion. But if you're anti-alcohol, by all means, you could probably find an alcohol-free rum extract. And then another option that I find out there with a lot of Italian rum cakes is you can use cherries. Now, it's totally optional. You don't have to have cherries in your layer if you don't want to. You could use they've got the nice usually at the liquor store. You can find the Luxardo cherry, maraschino cherries. Personally, I prefer tart cherries, red tart cherries, or some people call them sour cherries. And they can be challenging to find. But what I'm going to do is just kind of drain this straight into this here, which is an unopenable can here. And we're just going to we're just going to put some of this rum syrup straight into it, a couple tablespoons, to give it a nice flavor. So just put that in there. It might be best. This is water packed, so it might be best to it might be best to just drain out this cherry liquid, which is it's a sin because I love it. But in this case, you might want to drain it before you put your rum syrup into it, so it's not too watery. So then lastly, you should also have about 4 to 6, maybe 8 ounces of sliced toasted almonds. That is to decorate the outside of the finished cake. Now, I would use these sliced almonds myself. I understand that in Philly, it's peanuts, which I personally, I wouldn't use peanuts for this cake, but apparently in Philly, it's all the rage for. So if you're from Philadelphia and you use peanuts, put a comment down below. I'm using sliced almonds in this. These are toasted, and yeah, don't walk away. I just burned some of these things. So once your rum syrup comes up to the boil, then just cook this for a minute or two, maybe 3 minutes. It'll thicken slightly. The longer you cook it, the more it's going to thicken the solution. And as I said, I'm going to be using a 1/4 cup of gold Bacardi in this. Love the smell of this stuff. So now we're going to be using this cake syrup to obviously soak into the Genoise, because Genoise is a very lean, even though it does, my Genoise does have a little bit of butter in it, it is still a very lean cake. There's not a lot, it needs help. That's what a Genoise really is for, in my opinion, is to use for layer cakes that are going to be strongly flavored. In this case, with the rum syrup, I'm using a squeeze bottle just to kind of make it easier, but we'll get to that point. Okay, so for our last component for actually masking the outside of the cake, I'm making a stabilized whipped cream here. So this is just 3 cups of heavy cream, and to stabilize it, I have 3/4 of a cup of organic 10X sugar, or powdered sugar, and it's got a teaspoon of some non-GMO cornstarch in there. So as you can see, I've already set this whipped cream up pretty well. So I'm going to take this off of the stand mixer, and I'm going to sift in this powdered sugar cornstarch mixture. And now at this point, I'm also going to just add just a little bit of the organic vanilla bean paste in here. You can use vanilla bean pods, scrape it out. There's a lot of flavor going on in this with the rum and the cherries, so I'm not going to use that much. Just a little bit. And just mix this for another 30 seconds or so. Okay, so once you have all of your components ready and in place, now it's time for the fun part, which is putting this beautiful cake together. So I'm assuming you all know the idea, that you all grasp the concept of slicing a cake layer. This is the Genoise layer that we baked earlier. I just sliced these into thirds. If you're not real good with slicing, just try to use as a large of a knife as you can. Serrated is okay. I prefer a smooth edge. I think it tears the cake up a little less. And if you want to, you can also mark these around the sides so you get more even layers. So now we're just going to begin this, it's a lot easier if you have a cake stand like this, or you have a you have the a cardboard cake circle. If you don't have a cake circle, you can always cut one out of a cardboard box. Just measure it carefully. And now to start this, just going to put a little dab on there, and just take your first layer here. And what I also, another thing that I did was before I started to cut it, I made a little notch on the side, and that way all of your layers, you can eye it up, you can kind of get them back assembled where they were. So a little bit of the vanilla pastry cream there, that's just to keep it from sliding off. And then what I like to do is just invert the top first and put that on the bottom, because that's usually the least even layer. So I put that down on the bottom. And the first thing that we're going to do is take our rum syrup that we made earlier and just soak this layer here. And you want to be generous, but you also don't want to turn this into a mess either. So don't go crazy with it. Say, if you want a measurement per layer, I don't know, maybe a half liquid cup per layer here. So this is going to give our cake a beautiful rummy, boozy kind of flavor. Obviously, this is probably not a cake you're going to make for your kids. I don't know, maybe you will. Personally, I would pick something else for a child, but pretty sure that cooking the rum probably takes a lot of that out of it as well. So make sure that it is evenly and well coated, because this is what's going to give your cake the right flavor, and so it's going to be unmistakably a rum cake. And also, it just, like I said, these Genoise like this, there's not a whole lot going on there. Some people might like to eat this cake just by itself, but it could use some help, I like to say. So the first thing we're going to do here on this is we're going to put the vanilla layer. This is just going to be the vanilla Crema Pastera we made earlier. And the amounts that I give in the directions is it's going to be pretty close to where you're going to want to be on this. Maybe you might have a little bit extra, I'm going to say, but just give it a decent layer of the custard in there. And you don't have to go all the way out to the edges. You might want to leave a centimeter or so, so that way then it can kind of settle in and you don't have pastry cream oozing out the side of your cake too much. So just try to get it even. Like I said, it helps to have one of these rotating cake stands like this. Now, like I said, this is optional. I have the sour cherries here that I've macerated in rum syrup, and also a little bit of extra rum, depending on how boozy you want your cake. And again, you don't want to go too crazy on this. Just kind of like put them in the center and spread them out. I probably have about, I don't know, 10 ounces here of these cherries. We have an escapee. And just try not to get too much of the syrup in there, or it might make your cake a little bit of a mess. And now what I did, this is just an idea with these sour cherries, is I took, since this is going to be a 12 serving cake, I took 12 of the cherries out and put them aside so I can top our whipped cream. With that, it's just a nice touch. Just try to get those evenly dispersed so that every person gets 3 or 4 rum-soaked cherries, maybe 6 cherries per slice. Try to get them evenly in there. Press them down a little bit. Make your life a little easier. Okay, so once you have that, then the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to put our layer on, next layer, which is the center layer. And now again, look for those, if you notched your layers, look for that notch so that it'll give you a nicer lineup of your cake, and it'll be a little straighter. So just gently press that down on there. And just soak that layer, same as you did on the bottom layer. And if you notice that your pastry cream is a little thicker than you like it, you can also take a little bit of that sweetened whipped cream and fold that into it. I don't mind. This looks okay to me. It's very chocolatey and beautiful. Chocolate flavor. I think this will add an amazing depth of flavor to the cake. So then the last thing that you're going to do here is just put the bottom here. Look for the notch. But then I'm just going to go around here with that. Kind of smooth out the sides. Make sure that this is as even as you can. And then I like to take, if you have it, I like to take a little bit of this pastry cream around the outside too. Totally optional. You don't have to do that. If you used it all, it's no big deal. This will also help to seal in the cake and all the flavors. So then, once you get to that stage, you're just going to take your stabilized whipped cream here and pile it up there a little bit. Take an offset spatula and give it a nice masking, whipped cream masking here. And then you just go around the outside like this. It helps to just put these out onto a sheet tray. Put the remainder of your stabilized whipped cream into a piping bag. Give it a border, or you don't have to. I'm just going to pipe some shells on here. And then just take a nice cherry there and you know, smoke them if you got them. You got a couple of leftover almonds, and you can, you know, go crazy. There you have it. Box it up. It's probably best to just let this set overnight in the refrigerator to let it set up and make things easier to slice. Okay, so I boxed this Italian rum cake up last night and put it in the refrigerator. And now it's time to have a taste of this beautiful delicacy. Well, the classics are called a classic for a reason. And now we're going to cut into this beautiful cake, and I'm going to let you know how this thing tastes, whether it's a masterpiece or a flop. So I'm going to, I had to box this thing up. It's so big that I just wanted to get it contained. So I did let this cake set up overnight in the refrigerator. As I said, I think it's going to make your life a lot easier. I am going to slice down in here. And we're going to take one cherry slice. This thing on the plate here. Look at that. I can just pick that right up like that on the knife. Don't try this at home. Certainly is a very beautiful, classic looking cake. Let's give this a try and see how the whole thing tastes together. It has a very nice, pronounced, yet soft rum flavor. Exactly the way it should be if you make your syrup correctly. Not harsh, or, you know, if you're not particularly a huge fan of rum, you'll probably still like this cake. The cherries are, that's just a beautiful touch. Try some with the almond here. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? Just like down at Vito's Bar and Grill, you know what I'm saying? It's not bad at all. This is a really good recipe. It will test out a lot of your baking skills. It's not... This is probably not a cake you're going to try if you're a complete amateur. You could. It's a little... It is a little time consuming. You could try doing this in 2 or 3 days in stages. But yeah, beautiful cake, very tasty, and very reminiscent of, you know, like I say, the classic Italian family restaurant. That's such a huge tradition in this country that I hope never goes away. Try this recipe if you've got some time on your hands and don't mind the extra work. Give this recipe a try, and if you try it, put it together. Leave me a comment down below how it came out, and thank you for joining me.